as people are still coming in. Hi, everyone. Those of you joining, we will start momentarily, just giving everyone an opportunity to join. All right, I think we can start. We have most of our cohort here. So hi, everyone. Welcome to our 5th webinar in the summer series of Biotools Innovator Live. Our webinar summer series is a series of industry panels brought we're actually streaming this live on YouTube and on our LinkedIn page. Follow us if you want to see more webinars. As we move forward, it's hosted on our webpage as well at biotoolsinnovator.org. And so thank you for everyone joining us to the live stream and here in our Zoom webinar. Biotools Innovator, for those of you joining us from the stream and are not familiar with us, Biotools Innovator was launched 3 years ago. We are powered by MedTech Innovator, the largest life science accelerator in the world. We are an accelerator and a competition. We are supporting uniquely life science tools and molecular diagnostics companies in early stages of development, and proud to do so with the help of our incredible ecosystem of life science tools professionals. You will see some of them today here as we start talking about fundraising for BioTool startups. Fundraising is a big topic, as everyone knows. Everyone is fundraising at a certain stage of their existence as a company. Today, specifically, we have various different types of investors here that are all life science tools investors, and we have brought them on today to talk about the different type of investors, how you work with the different types of investors. And so we'll hear a lot more about this from everyone on the panel. So without further ado, let me introduce our fantastic panel. I'm Ayelet, by the way. I'll be the moderator today. I'm the Senior Director of Programs at MedTech Innovator and Biotools Innovator, and the Program Director for Biotools Innovator. So let's start with introducing our panel. So as we go through, each of you, please provide a brief introduction of yourself, your background, and your company. So how about we start with Carl? Carl, go ahead.
Hi, all. Thanks for having me. I'm Carl. I'm a principal at DesiBio Consulting. We're a boutique strategy consulting firm focused specifically in precision medicine and tools and diagnostics. Firm's about 10 plus years old. We also partnered with Broad Oak Capital, an investment bank, to create an early stage venture fund that, again, it invests exclusively in early stage tools, diagnostics, this sort of thing. Personal background, I have a PhD from MIT. I started my own biotech, ran that for a number of years, did a couple of strategic transactions, so had to be on the other side raising money, and then joined DesiBio. Nice to see you all.
Thank you, Carl. And if I may just add a quick tag on, how did you kind of get involved in life science tools investing?
Yeah, I mean, it's for my own interest, starting my own company, having been on the operator side, raising money, building teams, moving then to kind of broadening my horizons to consulting, seeing a broader set of it, and then figured this is an area that needs a little more capital, and particularly in the earliest stages of company formation. And so we saw a need and had the ability to put a fund together.
Thank you. And I'll add to that this fund that you mentioned with Broad Oak. So Broad Oak is one of our founding partners at Biotools Innovator. We're very fortunate to have their support and expertise as part of our Biotools Innovator program. So thank you for being here. I'll continue with Kelly. Kiara, go ahead, Kelly.
Hi, thank you for having me here. So I'm Kelly Kaihara, and I'm in our Life Science Tools and Diagnostics group at General Inception, where we also start companies in therapeutics and engineered biology. We are a venture studio based in the Bay Area, started by Paul Conley, who actually was one of the first investors in QuantaLife, which is the instrument behind Aaron. He also invested in 10x Genomics, Twist, and Scripta, big tools person. And, this is really his idea, his idea to start companies specifically geared towards life science tools and diagnostics. We invest in the pre-seed stage. And unlike a venture capital firm that has LPs, our investors are actually other venture capital firms in this space, such as North Pond Ventures, Genoa, Paladin, Vertical Venture Partners, and Omics. And so we help companies get through the pre-seed stage and then raise money at seed or Series A.
Thank you, Kelly. And a little bit about your kind of personal background and how you got to investing in life science tools companies.
Absolutely. So like Carl, I'm a scientist by training. I spent 12 years on the bench, mainly in diabetes research, doing my PhD at University of Chicago and then my postdoc at UCSF. San Francisco, worked 10 years in industry, got my start at Bio-Rad, covering the life science tools portfolio as a field application scientist before I moved in-house to the digital biology group to focus on ddPCR and single-cell RNA sequencing. From there, I wanted startup experience. I headed to Mission Bio to work on their single-cell DNA sequencing platform. And then I got my start in investing through the first portfolio company at General Inception. So in our model as a venture studio, we have executives go into the startup companies to help them build the company. And so I did that with a company in the benchtop DNA synthesizer space. And that was my into the investing side and being able to look at the broad spectrum of companies and due diligence across the whole life science tools and diagnostics space.
Thank you, Kelly. And with that, I'd like to move to Aaron now. And as we kind of switch gears into the other two investors on this panel, what we wanted to represent is really the corporate investment side. And so a little bit different from our kind of traditional funds. We wanted to talk a little bit about how corporate investors are investings are in tools companies. And so we'll start with Aaron at Bio-Rad. Go ahead, Aaron.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Erin Shia, and I work for Bio-Rad Laboratories. I'm excited to share some of my experience in the tool space and should note that my opinions are mine, not necessarily Bio-Rad's as a whole. I got my start at QuantaLife after my PhD. As Kelly mentioned, we were a small tools startup and Bio-Rad acquired us. So I've been on the startup side. I was then on the big company R&D side, so worked in R&D for several years, and then I made my move over to the business side. So now I focus on a variety of things, acquisitions, partnerships, licensing, but also investments. It's really exciting for us to invest in startups and be able to tap into that innovation and also provide resources. So as a strategic, we don't necessarily invest to turn a profit. We invest strategically and often to acquire. So it's a bit of a different relationship, really close partnership, and different motivation, really, in terms of the companies we invest in. But I'm excited to tell you more about how we work with startups because it's definitely one of the best parts of my job.
Absolutely. Thank you, Erin. And it's a really great perspective to have here that we definitely wanted to represent in this panel. And last but definitely not least, Charles, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for having me. Good morning, everybody. Charles Salim here, principal from Illumina Ventures. I've been with the fund for about a year and a half. And as some of you already know that we are an independently managed biotech venture fund that spun out of Illumina Incorporated, the mother company, some 7 years ago. We invest in early stage such as Series A plus minus one in the areas of tools, diagnostics, therapeutics, digital health, and most recently, we start to look at agriculture biotechnology that has a sustainability angle. So the underlying theme is actually omics powered medicine and diagnostics. As for myself, my training was in biochemistry, molecular biology, PhD. I was with Illumina Incorporated for a long time, 13 years. I had a good 10 years in product development, starting when Illumina did not have sequencing. We had microarrays. And I've done RUO product, IVD products. Interestingly, what got me into investment was my last 2 years at Illumina. I actually worked on mergers, acquisitions, both on private and public company deals. So I felt that seeing Illumina growing from 750 people to 10,000 was quite an experience. But I really want to see companies at the stage before 750 people. So I joined Element Bio, as you know, a new sequencing player. And in my 2 years there in marketing and business development, I saw the company grow from 37 people to 300. So that was a good experience before I joined venture capital side of things. It's been great. Looking forward to talking more.
Thank you, Charles. And I think some of you have kind of touched on it, but maybe let's dive a little bit deeper into your investment thesis. So we'd like to hear a little bit more about what is your investment thesis? What is it that you're looking for in the investments through your own fund or your own, in Aaron's case, not a fund specifically, but what is it that you're looking for, including kind of, stage of development, typical check size, what kind of investments do you do? And then also just in general, what if there are types of technologies that you are looking for? So how about we start with Carl?
Yeah, sure. No specific technologies. We do look for a lens towards cell and gene therapy. One of our core theses there was the pandemic was great, kind of ushered in this space, focus there, dollars there. But on the manufacturing side and QC/QA side, a lot of these therapies were effectively cobbled together using tools that are historically for small molecule or biologic manufacturing. And so we think there's going to be a significant push and focus on the tools aspect of manufacturing these therapies, and the field really having their head down to develop purpose-built assays, purpose-built tools. So that's something we look for, but it's not a hard and fast rule. In terms of stage, we generally look to a technology or solution being developed. It does exist, and ideally, it's been in the hands of alpha users. They don't have to be paying. You don't have to have revenue, but hopefully, there's someone external who's tried the technology and could vouch for whether it works or not. So that's really what we look for, and kind of the thesis that we look for in terms of company, area, etc.
Any specific series that's kind of your sweet spot for investing, or is it kind of across the board?
It's early. I mean, companies these days play a lot of games with their, if I see companies raising 4, 5, 6 seeds, then they raise 3 Series A's. Like, we're early stage, it's smaller. Hopefully that's one of the first seeds or Series A that a company raises. We're maybe not participating in their 3rd Series A, but we'll see.
Thank you. And I think maybe let's jump to Kelly here. You kind of touched on it, kind of the earlier stage of companies. Any specific areas within tools that are kind of your main interest that you could refer to, or any other requirements that you may have when looking at investments?
Absolutely. So again, we are very early. We like to say nothing's too early for us. A great source of where we find our founders are actually from academic institutions through their TTOs. And so some of them don't even have a pitch deck yet. Really having IP is the one critical component to us being able to partner with that founder. But, it was funny to hear Carl say that they need to have at least one alpha user or partnership, though most of our companies do. Again, because we're so early, we're looking for IP, core technology, proof of concept stage, and we believe that we can build through feasibility onto product development to get to that alpha stage during this pre-seed period. So very early. And then in terms of types of technologies that we look, again, we're across the gamut for life science tools and diagnostics. I would say things that make me excited are cellular. So just how we have multiomics, we've added genomics and proteomics. I think cellular function, keeping the cells alive and being able to study them sort of is a nice transition to the omic revolution. Again, proteomics is really strong after the genomics industry. So really like that space. And then in terms of diagnostics, we're always looking for platform plays. So not just one biomarker, but really a tool that you can expand to multiple indications. And there's something unique and innovative about the technology that creates a moat for that company.
I think Ayelet may have frozen temporarily.
Do you want to just go then?
Oh, I think Ari's still here.
Yes, I'll take over. So yeah, if we can, we basically transition to really breaking down the different types of investors. So we have a diverse panel here from early stage, but it would be good to just set the stage by talking about the differences between like VCs, CVCs, and early stage VCs. So why don't we start with Charles? Why don't we start with you on the early stage side?
Yeah, on that question, I already mentioned a little bit earlier. Illumina Ventures sweet spot is usually Series A. So we occasionally do seed stage investment or Series B or C. We're basically downstream of Kelly, someone like Kelly's general inception, and really as some of the earlier comments, the company is still in kind of very flexible in flux kind of stage. We obviously have strong technical expertise on the team. All the members of the investment team are PhD, and some of us actually have been CEOs before. In my career, earlier days, in the earlier days of my career, as I mentioned, I also have seen corporate venture and also M&A. So Aaron can talk more about it. So it's good to, as a startup, you actually try to think in different investors' perspective. So that helps you understand what we are actually looking for. Let's hear what others have to say.
Sure, go ahead, Aaron. Yeah, if you want to take it from here.
Thanks. Yeah, happy to provide a corporate perspective. The most important thing for us is strategic fit. So Bio-Rad does not have a dedicated fund, and I think that's true of many other large operating companies. And so we invest off of our balance sheet when we find something that is a great fit with our strategy. And a lot of times the goal is to bring the company in and acquire. So there's no limitations for us necessarily on check size or stage. We have a pretty broad portfolio, so it's not too difficult to fit into our strategy. But we are looking for things maybe on the earlier stage of things. So for me, the sweet spot is really a company who has data to show proof of concept and is in that alpha prototype phase. So once you get to the later stages of designing for manufacturability and really moving into all that verification validation, that's where strategics can provide a lot of value. Manufacturing, go-to-market strategy, things like that. I think the real value that startups bring is that innovation, quick problem solving, the earlier stages. So it's great for us to invest in and walk alongside companies that are in that alpha phase, solving those invention problems, right? Once you get to the point where you are ready for your betas and there's not a lot of invention left, it's mostly engineering, that's where we really like to bring things in-house and kind of finish that development on our end.
Nice. And Kelly, let's talk more about the startup studio model and kind of, how that fits into everything.
Sure. So we're, again, in this pre-seed stage, and because we have executives that we bring into all of our companies to help them build, it's very different from an incubator or an accelerator program where it's entirely up to the founding team to do all the work. In our model, what we found is, we want to roll up our sleeves, be a partner, you can call us at 2 a.m. We are co-founders with you to build the company. And so what's been interesting is that our founders are very diverse. So we thought our bread and butter would be founders that are academic professors, only have 20% of their time to dedicate to a startup. They love their day job. And so this model fits really well with them. But we get quite a bit of interest from first-time founders that just want executive experience and help to build it. We have founders like Dino DiCarlo out of UCLA that's on their 6th company, and they're like, that was really hard. Let's try a new model with more support, more of an infrastructure and ecosystem. So really, it's been fun to kind of, over the past 3 years, see the diversity in companies and founders that we've started.
Nice. And Carl, is there anything you'd like to add in terms of just the different structures or types of venture partners?
Yeah, I mean, or I guess structures on the actual venture fund side.
Yeah, sure. You could any way you'd like to answer that.
Yeah, I mean, at least from an investment standpoint, I'd say I'd take that one. Structure wise, we try to keep it really simple with just convertible notes. And that's probably something we'll get into a bit later, but both when I was, operating my company, raising money, now as an investor, I mean, I think convertible notes are great. Minimal levers to pull, few things to negotiate, kind of you can quickly get to, I think, a win-win pretty easily.
Well, we do have a question about this later on, so we'll get to talking about this. And sorry about this technical glitch earlier. I'd want to throw in a question here to all of you, kind of describing different models to work with companies through different types of investment. How do you play together in the sandbox if you do? Do you typically invest together? Do you like to see different types of investors like yourselves together, or do you prefer, depending on the round, maybe on the size of the round, just like to get your inside info on that?
We always love seeing Biorad already there. They're putting money into a company. That's a good sign.
Yeah, from our perspective, we love playing with a broad ecosystem. So we've done co-founding investments with other venture studios, which was great to learn. So FusionX and Initiate Studios were 2 that we've partnered with. We've partnered with accelerators like Biotools Innovator or Smart Health Catalyzer out of Chicago. And then we are also an evergreen fund, and so we not only, partner with venture capital firms that will do seed or Series A financing for our companies, but we also have this ability to partner with strategics like the Biorads, Thermos, Danahers of the world, where some of our companies might not go on a venture capital raising journey and might be a better as a quick tuck-in to a strategic partner. So we have close ties with all of these different avenues.
Charles, how about yourself? Is Illumina typically, kind of going into rounds? Are there any specific investors you'd like to see sitting on that same round with you?
Yeah, so similar to earlier answer, we like to collaborate with a lot of different types of people. And I don't have the count, but in 7 years we've co-invested with, of course, as you can imagine, hundreds of notable investors. What I'm going to say is it really depends. So during my time here, for instance, I heard some company not wanting to take strategic money early in their life cycle. You may, some of you early stage companies have heard that. And the reason is not to lock yourself into a particular path, right? You may have a very nice platform that can play with everybody. However, I've also seen companies that their future is heavily dependent on a particular, ecosystem or partners, and you just have to, judge based on what you need, the company, how to maturize your vision, who would be the right complementary experience, that your team doesn't have already. Earlier, I think we talked about technical or maybe operating experience. See what you need and approach the right investors for what they can offer.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Charles, for that. I'd like to switch gears a little bit into talking about something that's really been on everyone's mind in our cohort and outside of it. Of course, you're aware of it. So it's a little bit about trends and what's going on today. So what are kind of really quickly trends that you're seeing in terms of investment environment, including kind of the economic environment, any kind of big advice that you can give companies with it during that time, and kind of a little bit of what you're seeing in the investment landscape. How about Charles? We'll continue with you.
Yeah, you may have heard quite a few things already. For instance, flat is the new up, and I think one thing I really want to say, in this environment, you have to learn very quickly, because things do shift. In the past year, I think we were seeing at first maybe typical due diligence or negotiation could take anywhere from 3 weeks to a couple months. But now it's on the order of several months. Because you can imagine, like, investors are probably more conservative. They would like to see more validation, either from alpha customers, alpha units, from early revenue, or a path to early revenue. And with one investor, it takes much longer for to get to conclusion, and to form a syndicate is sometimes a daunting task. So we're going to talk more. I don't want to take all the time, but things are changing quickly, so you have to learn quickly.
Thank you. Carl, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the downsides of the pandemic. There was a nice focus on tools, but then what tools company did was they just over-raised like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
At valuations that make no sense, at amounts of deal sizes that make no sense. I see this as a little bit as a correction. I mean, when I was a operator as well, it's nice if you can raise a lot of money, but you really do need to be strategic in how much you're raising. And that doesn't mean you give yourself zero wiggle room and you only raise the exact dollar amount to get to your next milestone. But just look at the comps in your space. And if the comps don't support you doing a mid seven figure raise early on, don't do it, because that leads to a lot of pain. And you're seeing that now. You see a lot of companies that have, either complete leadership changes, completely out of business, et cetera. You do need to be thoughtful. And then investors on the flip side should be thoughtful as well. And when there is an economic downturn, need to support their portfolio. And I think, strong, good investors, probably like all those here, aren't going to just cut rope on a company because the economy went, tanked. I think any investor that does that is, they shouldn't be an investor, in my opinion.
Maybe to kind of drill into the question, specifically from one of our companies, we've heard the question of, in today's economy, do you think it's possible for a company to raise a Series A to fund pre-commercial activities? Is kind of along the lines of what you were saying? There were maybe enough raised during the pandemic. In today's environment, the reality is such that it's possible, or are these things that founders would have to rethink their raise?
That's the chicken and the egg. I mean, they have to, right? Who funds the pre-commercial then? I mean, that's one of the gaps we saw when we started our fund. We have money, we're investing, we're writing checks. I know other shops are. You just need to be thoughtful about who you're pitching to as well. In the pandemic, everyone, was exciting life science tools. A lot of groups jumped in and they don't have the stomach for this. They don't know the industry, they don't know the cycles. So you probably need to be more thoughtful about who you're reaching out to. But the right money is still there, and will still absolutely look at if you have a compelling technology, a compelling plan, and a reasonable chance of executing on those milestones, you're going to get a lot of no's, of course, but you got to kiss a lot of frogs. So
yeah, and
Absolutely.
I think now is actually a great time to approach corporate investors as well, for two reasons. The first is for those who are investing off their balance sheet. A lot of these companies have COVID cash, they have cash to spend. And when you invest off the balance sheet, it doesn't necessarily hit someone's budget. So Bio-Rad, like many companies in the industry, is being cost conscious given the economy, but the investments are really kind of this other pool of money for a lot of these companies. So there's not as many restrictions there. And then the second thing I'd point out is I think investing with a strategic can really be an accelerant. So usually when we work with a company, we bring R&D resources to consult, we bring marketing, we can advise on manufacturing and other things. So things that we can provide resources, but we can also just help steer you in the direction so that whoever acquires you, whether it's my company or another large company, they'll see the kind of things that they're looking for in terms of documentation, processes, that manufacturable design. So I think that can really help out later on in terms of the amount of money you get for the acquisition and getting that product to market. So if there are earnouts and other aspects of the deal, I think it gives you a higher likelihood of hitting those, when you get in with a large company to frame things in the way that these acquirers are looking for them.
Thank you. I think that's a really important point, and I'm really glad you brought it up. Kelly, anything to add to this? And maybe I'll also kind of ask you an add-on. Do you see the light at the end of the tunnel? Is there any change in the current trend?
Yeah, sort of like what we've seen in this environment is actually more opportunities for us selfishly, but as companies, I think they try to go out and raise a seed and they're not successful, or it's much harder because a lot of seed investors are doing bridge funding for their own companies, or they're pulling back. We've seen a lot more sort of trickle back down to us, and we have a lot of dry powder and we're making investments. And so from our perspective, we're here to sort of help companies that maybe might not be at the stage for a seed financing in this environment, but there's a lot that we can do in the pre-seed stage to hit milestones. And then really that ecosystem of having our investors be the venture capital firms. We're doing a little more, very relationship building, really helping our companies raise money when they get to that stage through not only our friendly member VCs, but also the broader VC community. It may take a little longer from previous years, but we're still finding our companies are able to raise money in this environment. I think, so all of the companies that raise inside rounds, and then all the companies that are trying to raise their first round, it's going to be that much more competitive in, the second half of this year and early next year. So being really strategic about different sources of capital, whether it be pre-seed funding, angel investors, non-dilutive funding, really just kind of spreading out versus just targeting traditional venture capital firms.
Extending your runway to as much as possible at this point. Thank you for that. I think it's a good segue, and maybe, you know, with General Inception, that's a very early stage that you're investing. But for example, Carl, for you, when investing in companies already out there, past this stage, what are the different types of validation that you're looking for when looking at a company? Are you looking for specific product milestones, any sort of traction specifically that would be a good signal for you? Maybe even revenue from services. What are the things that are kind of good signals for you?
Yeah, I mean, because we're earlier, you know, we don't specifically look for revenue, although right, if a company has it, that's phenomenal.
Of course.
You know, we're willing to take some technology risk, so we'll dive in on technology due diligence there. I mean, as a, you know, consulting shop with a kind of bank partner together, you know, we have a capacity to kind of churn through some of that, you know, pretty quickly from a diligence perspective. So we need to kind of have faith that the technology works. So whatever data the company has, but again, that's also why, you know, if there's an alpha user, somebody external, you know, who's had their hands on the product, that's generally the, you know, a pretty hard and fast rule for us. If there was no one who's ever, you know, handled it outside the company, you know, we'd ask that, you know, if it could get to that point. And again, it doesn't even have to be a paid user. You know,
but just some sort of technical de-risking from an external
exactly
user.
Because you know, a lot of people can make something work in their own hands. Like, can you make the general public, you know, does it work in the general publics? We think that's a big pass off. So that's kind of the critical line in the sand for us, at least as a firm.
No, fantastic. I like that answer. Aaron, anything on your end that you know, that are hard and fast rules, or just things that you're seeing as a reality from what you're investing in?
Yeah, I mean, for us, the biggest thing is that strategic fit. So it can be a company that is in the alpha prototype phase, or a company that already has products on market and has revenue. But the question that I often ask is kind of, what can we as the investor bring to the company to help accelerate them? So it has to be something that fits with our business, whether we have deep knowledge in that market, whether we have customers, there's maybe a manufacturing or technology synergy. And I think as the startup, you can look at it from that lens too. When you approach a strategic, how is my product going to fit into the market that the strategic is in, or maybe extend their market presence?
All right, fantastic answer. And Charles, I think you have something to add there.
So I comment on a few areas, and not in particular order. So let's say when companies come to us because we invest, you know, in technology, so protectable IP, right? So that I cannot really put a number on all of the following things I'm going to say, but if you have one patent application, good, you know, submitted, or, you know, better yet, you know, granted, good. But if you have 5, even better, right? So to Carl's earlier point, if you have 1 alpha user, good. If you have 3, even better, right? So on and so forth. So I cannot really put a number, but protectable IP differentiated, you know, position, that's very important for us. A team, what we look for in the team is what you would like the company to become. You can, you know, a company can show us this revenue projection. You know, that's great. You know, that's going to be, if you apply some multiple, you know, billion-dollar company in 5 years from now, but you don't have a matching plan for that. You don't have the team to execute, then we find the disconnect, and that's a no-go. In terms of the technology, we understand early stage companies may not be ready, but again, you know, especially in today's environment, are you thinking comprehensively, you know, thoroughly about the manufacturing issue you may encounter, the supply chain issue? Are you designing and developing your product and services in a way that's going to be resilient? And lastly, I'm coming back to the market question. Why does the world need another company or another solution? So alpha testers or actually paid customers would even be better than, you know, unpaid. You know, of course, you know, as you can imagine, paying customers would be better. So evidence generation papers, those are very important. So tell us they are really, people having a need. What's an unmet need? I think those are the the areas I would touch upon.
I'd like to dive in a little bit deeper with you on the team part. Any specifics that you can give our companies on what are the skills or qualities that you're looking for in a team?
Yeah, so a lot of companies, end goal would be products and services, and business models are very important. And you usually see a technology company starting with some exciting, technology or inventions developed at the university, very ambitious, enthusiastic, academics. These are great, but you still need to have people who have seen, who have done it, actually, who have done that part of, how to transition, things from an idea to a product that really works. The difference there is a lot of technologies or inventions work once, or 3 times in papers, right? And they got great publications. But what you really need is something that works in many people's hands. So we look for members on the management team. Sometimes you don't, a company doesn't get all the skills and expertise needed all at once. Then we look into the advisory boards, board members, to see that, okay, do they have the right guidance for how to do this? And in addition to that, I would just add, given today's environment, a strong operator or from advisors is fine. You need that kind of guidance, to make sure that the company doesn't fall apart or runs out of money, before it reaches the next milestone.
Thank you for that detailed answer. And I think we'll get to the board's point later, but it's an interesting one. And I'll turn this over to Kelly because you have fractional executives that are joining the team, and you're founding the team you're building the company, with the founding team. Where are the areas where you see kind of the scientist turned entrepreneur needing the most support when it comes to building a company?
Absolutely. I think definitely product development. So our scientists, can skew to very academic or maybe don't have product development experience. And so that's where our team can come in and start putting, them through phase gates, waterfall method, institute project management onto the team, and really start getting from feasibility to verification and validation, like Aaron said, and start to think about how to turn the invention into a product. The other resource we have is we work really closely with engineering firms such as Triple Ring, Generate, Paramit. And so getting that early read on, okay, we're designing the instrument for the first time. What are some pitfalls that you're going to encounter? How do we do this? Make some good key decisions up front so that they're not going to harm us a year down the road. So that's another component. And then finally, the market aspect. So oftentimes our companies, again, are not at the alpha stage, but what's really important for us is a market signal. And so we do a lot of voice of customer to test potential customers and what they want in the space. We have our member VCs that are telling us what they think about this area. And we're always looking for technologies that potentially not only grow existing markets, but have the potential to break open a brand new market.
Absolutely. And Carlin and Aaron, I'll kind of ask this as an open question to you. Anything to add on specific qualities that you're looking for in team members or areas that you see as really needing support from early stage innovators in the tool space that you worked with?
Sure. I can weigh in on that. Something that's really important to me and a leadership team is transparency. So we like to work really closely with our investments. That includes maybe meeting monthly to go over R&D progress. I'll bring some R&D folks with domain expertise, some marketing folks, but having that really close relationship will allow us to provide resources and help the team solve problems. I think sometimes startups can be very protective of their invention, and that makes a lot of sense, right? You're a small company, you're trying to break into a space. Often startups feel like a big company might just be scoping them so that they could implement that product idea themselves. I see that a lot, but it's, from my perspective, totally off the table. Startups move so much faster, and so we're not scoping you. We're genuinely interested in your product, and if we feel like there's a strategic fit, we love to work really openly with those teams. So I think transparency is a big key. I'll also echo what Kelly said. The documentation and the processes is often something you don't think about in the beginning, and you may not see that it's helpful for you, but that is something that the people who are going to manufacture this are ultimately looking for. And strategics will often have to backfill that documentation later. So the more you can document processes and testing and requirements specifically, right, starting with those product requirements, marketing requirements, because once it goes over into a large company's product development and commercialization process, all that stuff has to be there. And the more you can show that you're thinking about those things, the more attractive your company is to a strategic.
Thank you. Thank you. And I hope everyone's writing this down. These are wonderful, wonderful things. Carl, maybe let's stay on the topic, but from a little bit of a different angle. Any hard and fast rules in what you're looking for companies in terms of financials, any multipliers, anything, anything? I know you said in general, no hard and fast rule on that, but anything that would be beneficial for our companies to know that they're closer to what you're looking for.
Yeah. We generally, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we like a convertible note structure. It kind of kicks the can down the road on actually valuing the company, a number of these factors. And particularly if you're investing earlier, how much is your prototype worth, in your lab in a broader market? I don't think anyone can answer that. I do think, however, though, being very grounded in comps, I mean, ultimately, I think probably most, if not all, investors are looking to, public comps for, valuing, for investing, for, what you can do on milestones, all these things. And so to be, diligent on your comps. You might see some deal get done in kind of like an adjacent space. Like if it's too adjacent, it's not a reasonable comp. But some of these companies that come in, they, at least when the money was flowing, they try to do a pre-money and they say, oh, we're worth $20-30 million. And you're like, show me the comp. if you have a comp, fine. But so be thoughtful about that. And again, it all goes back to kind of the financing and do you want a large percentage of a small pie, or do you want a piece of a large pie? Like that's what we're all thinking about, and we can partner in a material way to, I think, get there.
Thank you. Anyone else that has kind of something to add on in terms of financials, what you're looking for in a company? I know, Kelly, this might be a little bit too early for your for companies you're investing in to look at financials, but anyone else looking for anything specific? I know our companies have asked about annual growth rate or any multipliers, any valuation comps for that matter. Anything else?
I would add to that one important thing, again, I cannot attach a number to it, is milestones accomplished since your last raise. That is very important because that's how investors can kind of extrapolate. Okay, if you raise X money and you accomplish this much, and if we give you Y money, how much do we think we can get? So that is very important. And sometimes I feel the companies also need to focus on what they really need to show. Right? Earlier we talked about IP. Okay, fighting for patents is expensive. And but at the same time, you want to have alpha units, and you have to really play through the trade-off and have kind of your priorities, set your priorities right. And so you can use your last raise to strategically present a case, right? Is it data, is it customers to the next round's investors. So think ahead, and I think that is very important. And since we're talking about financing, I would also add a point. A lot of companies kind of have the misunderstanding, especially early stage companies are very concerned about dilution. And in today's market, investors seem to have more weight on this. But really, I would encourage companies to focus on value. So value creation is more important than valuation, because once there's value demonstrated and created, valuation will follow. So this is some perspective. I hope you really think about it.
I couldn't echo that enough.
I
just
could
to
imagine.
jump in, I mean, when you're building a team, not even talking to investors, you're building a team. If you need a co-founder and you find the right person, or you're making a first hire, and they're fairly seasoned, and they're going to make the company.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, don't waste your time negotiating 0.5% here. Like, give the person what they're worth, because they're going to get you to a much higher place, and then your piece of the pie is worth a lot more too. 80-20, know what to negotiate.
I think that's a really important point, and even without saying that outright, you've mentioned several times, seeing the validation with external users. So going back to the same thing, create value, show value. I think this is kind of a thread that keeps coming back, and really important to say here. No, thank you. I really appreciate these insights. I think I'd like to touch a little bit on the convertible notes. Carl, you mentioned this, and I know a lot of our companies have asked. They're in the process of raising their rounds. If you could expand a little bit on investing through convertible notes and kind of the pros and cons maybe of that. What are the risks associated with that at an early stage like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really flexible. It kicks the can down the road on valuing. There's like 3 or less terms you even need to really kind of care about and negotiate. So I think there's a lot of benefits. From a company standpoint, I'd say the one tricky piece is the conversion date. Typical convertible notes, like a year automatic conversion. Or if you raise your subsequent round. So you do need to be thoughtful about that date. Most investors, if you still need more time, whatever, they'll mutually agree to extend that date. But if you raise from the wrong group, market downturns, they want to cut rope or whatever, that's a point that could kill the company. If they don't want to extend that date, I mean, you got to pay them back, or you're out of luck. So I'd say that's the one sticking point or potential downside from a company standpoint. If you're taking money from the right group, they're bought in for the right reasons, it should be less of an issue, but it is something to watch out for. Make sure you think you can raise that round to convert that note in that time frame.
I'll turn to the other investors here. When you see convertible notes in an earlier stage raised, is that something that you typically work with under the assumption that you don't usually use that mechanism? So when you have companies that have raised through convertible notes, anything to note for you as future investors? Charles or Erin, might be a question for you more.
So I can say a couple of things. So obviously, convertible notes are safe. Are a good way to kind of kick the can down the road to get some money quickly. And that's very important. So it's almost typical that we see in the cap table. There's some convertible already. maybe on occasions, I've seen like companies like with the market cap that got them into some kind of trouble. It's just because the expectations when that was set and the market has shifted, then there's kind of a disconnect in expectation and reality. So, but there are a lot of term sheet structure in agreements in a different way. So without having to deal with that question, and typically 20% discount, that's very usual. I haven't seen anything else yet.
Okay. Thank you. And time flies when you're having fun. So we're almost at the end of our public broadcast, which is the first hour. We'll have 30 minutes later when we bid everyone from the live stream farewell and have time for Q&A with our cohort. But in these 5 minutes, I'd really like to talk about kind of a last thing that is a recurring theme, and that's really communication with investors. So I think one of the things that I'd like to ask you all is about, first of all, how do you make yourself more visible to people like you? What is kind of a good advice for people on how to make themselves more visible, even to the extent of, is it okay to cold call or cold email a VC? Are there better ways of doing this? But is it okay if it's a last resort? So I'll turn that over to whoever wants to start.
Sure, I'm happy to start. Email me, definitely. I think it's fine to cold email or contact companies, and I would encourage startups to think about strategics, right? There's a lot of value that they can provide. We can be great partners. And so email, LinkedIn messages, definitely consider the strategics, because I think it's a pretty rich interaction that we have. If you think about who are your big competitors, those could also be potential sources of funding and partners. If you're a startup who's not interested in building a sales channel and a manufacturing channel, I think there's a lot of benefits to getting involved with a strategic early on. We love to have those relationships. It doesn't, even if we're not investing, right, we can still have those relationships with startups. I think the long-term relationships are really valuable. It lets us figure out mutually when the best time for us to provide resources or to engage is. And that's a decision that the startup can make and the big company, depending on your needs at different times of your business.
Thank you. Anyone else wants to chime in on tips for how to make yourself more visible?
Sure. I mean, I think doing things like Biotools Innovator is a major step to getting more exposure. I think having, the mentor and the judges and just the whole ecosystem of this community, it's very hard to find people that are passionate and focused on life science tools and diagnostics in the overall grand scheme of things. Most of it's therapeutics, med devices. And so, this program really stood out to me when I first joined because everyone was so passionate about this space. And it's all about networking. So I totally agree with Erin, like happy to get cold contacts through email. It's interesting when you and several of your other colleagues get the same email, because then you realize it's definitely cold contact. So just a tiny strategy, maybe go one at a time so it feels more personable. But obviously the warm intro is the best way to do it. Have someone be able to send your deck to the venture capital firm and have them decide whether they want an intro or not.
Thank you. Thank you for plugging Biotools Innovator in. We really is our goal here. And when we started this with RCT and Broad Oak, really the goal is to create that ecosystem, to have people, to give people more access to the Biotools ecosystem, which, as you mentioned, not as easy to access if you don't know the field. And so, that's one of the ways we of course try to contribute in this. Anything else, Carl or Charles, that you want to add in terms of just being more visible? Any conferences that you are maybe watching or publications that you're following?
Conference
Carl, you want
specific.
to go first?
Yeah, I mean, whatever conference is relevant for your technology,
Mhm.
that's a good way. I want to echo what Kelly mentioned. I mean, accelerators, it's phenomenal free help. And it is that validation. I mean, anything to get validation, right? If external judges choose you, like that's validation. The one caveat I'd add is some element of, depending on the type of accelerator, et cetera, some elements of an accelerator can, I don't want to say artificial, but there's some exercises you kind of have to go through. Don't change your business plan specifically try to like win the competition. That's not the point of this. Ultimately, the point is the free help, the honing your plan and these sorts of things. So keep that in mind too, that work on what your actual plan is. Don't try to tweak it just to for the sake of kind of that competition element.
There is a specific question I'll ask when we switch over to our Q&A about that focus point, but we'll get to this. I want to just bid our attendees on the live stream farewell. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed it. I think there were a few really good things here that you can take away as messages, and I really want to thank the panelists here for providing their input. And so, Ari, time to close the live stream, and then we'll